Kafi, Volume 4, regards charity and ethics thereof. It regards Ramadan, fasting, the retreat, and it regards pilgrimage and visitings. Narration 7565 regards the 10 circumambulations of Prophet Muhammad. 7's obliged, by the way. In the pilgrimage. 3 in the evening. 3 between dusk and dawn. 2 at dawn. 2 in the early afternoon. And he'd rest in the late afternoon. Narration 7401 mentions how if you kill a wild bird, you're owing of something similar, as far as the pilgrims are concerned. And one of the things is it talks about the Book of Ali, like we've heard of the Book of Fatima and stuff like that. It's not that they claimed a different book of Revelation. It's that, like Sahih Bukhari and all that stuff, but they were actually witnesses of the prophet, so they wrote down the narrations for themselves, and they weren't the only ones, but that's what's meant. 7362 mentions how it's not necessary to touch the black stone. Yes, there's benefit to it, just like there's narrations about benefit of touching the wall or something like this, but it's not as such that you would push yourself through the crowd to do such. So that one person who was killed by the Saudis, the one here, for trying to touch the wall, and they knew he touched the wall on purpose, and but he was caught by the crowd and drug against the wall, scraped against the wall. It was quite a mess, apparently. No, he wasn't doing, he didn't do it because he was Shia, basically. Although the narration of the one, but again, you got to look at the whole package of a teaching, not just, oh, I'm going to do this, and disregard the ethics around it, right? 7329 mentions that a pilgrim's marriage is invalid. The one that they got on the pilgrimage. And there's other sayings that indicate that their plight is even worse than that, because they would be forbidden to marry if they got married. 7261 mentions the kohl, which can be used, for ailment or such, but it can't be used if in, around the eye, that sort of thing, the eyeshadow. It can't be used if it's perfumed or if there's a intention of beautification thereof. 7238 talks about how a person is to avoid the perfumes and such, even in one's food. You don't even touch the perfumes with your hands. And you avoid particularly good smells, but if a bad smell comes across, you don't avoid that. 7191 mentions that a pilgrim can wear a ring, but likewise, it's not supposed to be for beautification. 7131 talks about how you can put on oil and stuff before you put on ihram, but you don't put it on. You don't put it on once you're in ihram, and you, as I said, you don't touch the scented oil. 7123. Oh, and it's also said you should probably not use so thick of an oil, that sort of thing. 7123 talks about the pilgrim that has taken a bath, as is required, to put on the plain clothes, or the two unstitched pieces of fabric if you're male. He is, you're supposed to do that once you've bathed. So why a person would go to sleep before finishing that final step, I don't know. 6988 talks of how the best pilgrimage is the pilgrimage of the joining the Hajj Tamatu. You have the Hajj and the Umrah combined. $6,969 talks of the bridge, how bridges have Satans, and that this Satan departs when you invoke the name of God. So remember, even driving along where you may cross over a bunch of bridges, invoke the name of God, and the Satan departs. 6,915 mentions that you don't have to repeat the pilgrimage if you acquire more of the faith. Like for example, a person believes, in the basic testimony of faith, so therefore they believe in the Quran and what the Prophet has taught, but they don't believe per se some of the implications of authority or something like that comes from that. And then they realize it later, they don't have to repeat pilgrimage. Just like we find that a person who has been, there's no harm in a person who is, the circumcised and the uncircumcised, they don't, there's nothing wrong with uncircumcised people doing the pilgrimage and such. Although the Quran doesn't, there's reasons in the Quran like Surah 30:30 and 391 and such to kind of not favor the ritual genital mutilation of even the males, but we have 6,705. Al-Hazwara to Al-Mas'a was the limits of Masjid al-Haram, according to Prophet Ibrahim. 6,701 is a longer narration that indicates that just as Al-Quran, that Abraham was not ordered by God to sacrifice his son. He thought it, and then God provided different, sending an angel to keep him from carrying out the command he thought he received in a dream. And then it was really Satan that gave him the dream, because hey, you've done enough with the dream, that sort of thing. That was what he was told. So the Quran does not sanction the idea that, 6,627 talks of how the first night of Ramadan, the night before the holiday prayer, if a child is born or if somebody accepts Islam, the charity ending Ramadan is not obliged because, the month has passed. Because the Zakat al-Fitr is something that completes the fasting. So if the fasting wasn't obliged, 6604 talks of a prayer that Ali ibn Talib, the fourth caliph, said in the first night of the 10th month, in which the surah recited was 112 in both rakat, but 1,000 times in the first, but only once in the second. 6,627. 6,588 talks about, the night of power. It's in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Certain things are decreed throughout the year. 6,559. 659 talks about how a person who has been fasting and doesn't tell a person that they've been fasting, and someone's offered them food, the reward is even greater. It's like a year. Voluntary. We're talking about a non-required fast, of course, but 6553 talks of the 27th of Rajab and its 60-month reward. 6,340 talks about the redness that passes overhead when it's time to break the fast. 6,317 talks about if it's not the Ramadan or some required fast, then you may do as one likes. But if it's an obligatory fast, have at least a sip of water. Before dawn. 6,296 to 6,299 first mentions the fast of the Thursdays, the beginning Thursday of the month, the last Thursday of the month, and the Wednesday in between. We do find that there's tradition about Prophet Muhammad saying elsewhere having every Monday and Thursday because of the change of the guards of deeds. And the narration in between mentions the fast of Dawood, the every other day, which was given up for the 3-day fast in the middle of the month. 6,383 to 6,394 mentions that the internal stuff, like the snuff or an enema, would invalidate the fast, but otherwise a fasting person is allowed to provide to use ointments and stuff. If there's not an intoxication from some smell released, through incense, then that's a different story. Although if it's an intoxicating incense, you shouldn't be using it in the first place. But generally medicines are allowed. But if there's something with the taste that would reach the throat, then that's not to be done. One may brush your teeth in the traditional manner, but not in the manner of, the toothpaste that leaves the taste in your mouth and accidentally swallow some tasted water. If you just brush it up, you don't have to drain your mouth of all saliva or something like that. But 6,420 to 6,426 talks about how a person knows best how they are in the prayer and the fast, or with the fasting. And, because people are like, well, I've seen you do this. It's like, well, I'm done. But if they get up and they're like, well, they'll stand for everything except the prayer, then you have an issue. But otherwise, that's not what's going on. So you don't fast if it's going to hurt your prayer or it's going to hurt your vision. But the people who are withdrawing from caffeine don't have an excuse from headaches and all that sort or anything with the fasting to not fast, because that's proof. If your withdrawals or caffeine causes crashes in energy anyways, and most people would have listed that as forbidden in the first place. 6686 to 6689 talks about the pilgrimage of Adam, how the light beings greeted him, confirming his pilgrimage. And when it came time to shave his head, a ruby with a sharp edge descended for him to shave his head. 6716 to 6723. I guess it talks about 60. It starts at 6714. This sequence of prophets before Prophet Muhammad doing the pilgrimage. David, Jesus, Moses, Solomon did it. Oh, I don't remember the point where it says that, but 6739 to 6746 talks of how you can kill or strike back at violence that has happened in the sacred precincts. But Mecca has an exception that if a person flees the punishment and doesn't leave the sacred precincts, then, they don't get punished until they leave. But the thing is, a person's not supposed to feed them and fetch water for them and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah. And, it mentions the same with other crimes. But a person can be prevented from sneaking off and making purchases and that sort of thing. But it starts off with a narration that talks about how the violence was permitted in Mecca for, just one period of time. It says hour, but I think the term hour refers to more than an hour, like a period of day, like after, was it, that sort of thing. 6750 to 6757 mentions how you shouldn't stay in Mecca for years straight, how no building should be higher than the Kaaba. I mean, I guess the masjid building itself, but the buildings around the towers and stuff like this isn't supposed to be the case. You don't remove dirt or pebbles for the masjid. The pebbles you pick up for the stoning, that is used, but you don't take home the dirt and the pebbles from the pilgrimage. And you also don't take up the trees and stuff, except if there's fruit-bearing trees, the fruit may be eaten. If there's herbs, like a particular type of grass, then that can be eaten. 6824 to 6826 mentions the 20 lesser-known pilgrimages of Prophet Muhammad. And it mentions something that people might not get is the months of pilgrimage being 3 months, the 11th, the 12th, and the first month. It took a month to get there, or more. So the actual pilgrimage itself is only within those days. 70 7251 to 7253 talks how it's not harmful to smell certain herbs, the ithcure, the lavender, cotton, cotton's, I guess, something you can touch. That's not an herb. Wormwood, that sort of thing. There's no harm in touching that sort of thing when you're on the pilgrimage. But like the citron and the apple and the lotus and stuff, if you're eating these things, the fruit of the lote tree, you avoid the smell of it while you're in the fast. 7288 to 7301 talks about the killing on the pilgrimage. And the main point is that if it's not something that harms you, then only the domestic things are allowed to be, consumed. The domesticated birds that don't flap and fly, and the cattle, that sort of thing. The wild beast, the predatory human that attacks, the insects that are pestering a person, the biters and that sort of thing, it's permitted to deal with those while you're on the pilgrimage. 7457 to 7459 mention the prayers, at the Kaaba, touching the black stone or pointing to the black stone, that you reject Jibtin Tagut, the rebel and the superstition, that you reject Alat, goddess, Al-Uzza, the mighty she, Satan, that sort of thing is said there. And 7712 to 7752, in short, can be said to be referring to the pilgrimage, and how there's miraculous cases for people to accomplish the pilgrimage. But you do your best. If Arafat's too full to be on, then you be on the high hill. But you just do your best. And the people making up for the pilgrimage, well, some people will hold off. Like if it's for women's issues, they might hold off, and and then go in and do the circumambulations. Talks of if you've left Muzdalifah before dawn, then there's atonement to be made. If you've left Arafat, the hill, before the end of the ninth day, before the sunset, because in religion, sunset starts the new day. Then there's atonement to be made. But if you've even attended stoning, then that is, we're not talking stoning people, we're talking about stoning the pillars. One's counted as attending the Hajj. Let us remember the simple fact that in Islam, in the pilgrimage, there's the psychosexual symbolism, psychological. A person's enacting their psychology, but they're doing it not just some personally invented path working, they're doing something set. There's certain myths, stories full of meaning that relate to these places, but just the format itself, that's said to be revealed. And once in a lifetime, a Muslim who can afford it, who has the means, does the pilgrimage. All these things, any obligation, it's according to a person's actual means.